Imagine you are strolling down the street, minding your own business, when suddenly you see someone sprinting towards you with a look of sheer panic. Your heart leaps into your throat, your palms get sweaty. For a split second, you consider whether you should start running as well, just in case the apocalypse is nigh. Unbeknownst to you, whilst you're contemplating whether or not to ditch your backpack because it might weigh you down, but also might serve as a useful rear protection tool, there are many other things going on beneath your conscious awareness. Your pupils are dilating to allow more light in for better vision of your surroundings. Your ears even optimize for lower frequencies, meaning you cut out the higher pitched nonsense that your friend is talking about and pick up on real threats in your environment. And just as your hormones are ready to start getting involved as well, you notice the sprinting individual veer off into a bakery. Clearly, they were just late for a cross-on emergency. Panic over, you feel your heart slowly retreat from your mouth back to its proper place and your shoulders relax, and what on earth just happened? Well, dear listener, what you just experienced is your body's very own early warning system, also known as the autonomic nervous system, or the ANS. It's kind of like having your very own James Bond, always on alert for any potential threat, even if that threat is just someone in desperate need of a cross-on. But here's the interesting part worth us studying. Your body doesn't just switch between calm and panic modes at random. There's a whole complex dance going on inside of you, and it's one that's been fine-tuned by millions of years of evolution. And this complex dance is something that modern psychology has finally started to answer, with a concept called Polyvagal Theory, first proposed by Dr. Stephen Porges. And I'll admit it's an odd-sounding name for something that might change the way you think about everything, from whether your morning commute to how you handle difficult conversations, and even how you think about mindset. So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology podcast with me, Sam Webster, as always, diving into the real science of self-improvement, uncovering the psychology behind building a life well lived. And today we are diving into the details of neuroscience and understanding how our body's nervous system is wired to perceive safety and threats, and how we all have our own slightly unique spin on it. And why is this important to understand? Well, glad that you asked, because it's going straight to the heart of the growth mindset theory. If someone can perceive advice and feedback without feeling threatened, and they can take failures in their step and can experience a failure as a very comfortable event, well, then they can have a growth mindset, of course. But if they perceive feedback as threatening, that they aren't good enough, if every failure makes them feel deeply uncomfortable and unsafe, then they probably have a fixed mindset. And as I've said before, and I will say again, if you want to understand one aspect of psychology, such as mindsets, you kind of need to know about all psychology. So let's get our thinking caps on and we will kick off after the break.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your own online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. Shopify.com/promo.
How safe we feel is crucial to our physical and mental health. And Polyvagal Theory is here to give us an overview on how to understand what our body is doing to perceive threats. It explains how our autonomic nervous system regulates our emotional and physical states, and the profound connection between our nervous system, our sense of safety, and our ability to engage with the world. As I mentioned, it was first proposed by Dr. Stephen Porges in 1994, and it's become a crucial part of how we understand attachment theory, trauma-informed practices, and therapy, but it can offer a lot of insights for anyone wanting to live a calmer life with some more control of their reactions, better empathy for those around us, and by exploring the different aspects of polyvagal theory, we can learn how to improve our own lives, whether in relationships, work, education, personal growth. Each area we will have a core take-home by the end of the episode, but firstly we're going to cover all the basics of polyvagal theory itself and how it works. So at the heart of polyvagal theory is the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, and this controls involuntary bodily functions like heart rate, digestion, respiratory rate, pupil dilation, sweat responses, and there's a few different systems at work. We'll have terms like parasympathetic activation, dorsal vagal state, and it could sound like a lot of technical jargon, so instead I'm going to talk about superheroes instead for a moment. Specifically, the Hulk. If you remember him, he is the big green guy that smashes everything in sight when he's mad. And unlike a superhero that puts on a cape to transform into their alter ego, the Hulk is the normal-ish scientist dude and general nice guy Bruce Banner. But he transforms into the Hulk when he is mad. Now, imagine that every time you get stressed out, like if your boss drops a last-minute deadline on you or your Wi-Fi decides to die before a Zoom call, which mine seems to, that's the only time it dies, I swear. Anyway, imagine that happens, and each time it did happen, you were to transform into your own version of the Hulk. You might not be big and green, but your heart probably pounds faster, your muscles tighten, blood will start getting prioritized to your muscles, and your rational thinking brain will be a little bit less capable, let's say. Sure, you might not be ready to punch holes in the wall, but you could be tempted to try. And that is your sympathetic nervous system kicking into a higher gear, ready to fight or flight from whatever danger is going on that your nervous system has just detected. However, if you can pause for a second, breathe deeply, remind yourself it will all be forgotten in the future, and you might as well just enjoy the situation instead of fighting it, then your inner Bruce Banner can come out, the calm, collected scientist dude who just likes figuring things out without breaking everything in sight. And this is your parasympathetic nervous system. And it's all about keeping you cool, calm, collected, maybe even a little bit zen. So when you're sipping your hot tea after a long day, lying in bed about to drift off, it's your parasympathetic nervous system at the helm, making sure your body is resting, digesting, and generally not tearing through the fabric of reality. So if you want to use more psychology terminology in your everyday life, when you think of the words Netflix and chill, it could be psychologically and physiologically more accurate to say Netflix and parasympathetic activation, which might not sound as catchy to most people, but I personally really like it. In fact, I even wanted to title the episode that, but apparently whenever I use weird, mega geeky science reference puns for my titles, no one clicks on them. It's frustrating, but I'm not annoyed about it, obviously, because that would be me giving into my sympathetic activation system. However, I do feel like the term Netflix and parasympathetic activation could be a thing, like on a mug or a t-shirt, which sounds like I'm doing a really good intro for an advert for Shopify, which I'm not. But if Shopify wants to sponsor me, that's fine. However, I am in the slow process of launching a premium community and store for geeks like me. So if you do want to buy a mug or a t-shirt with stupid psychology terminology on it, I will have your back eventually once I've worked out how to use Shopify. Anyway, my pun-based tangents are over now, sorry. What we do need to know more about is the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is a key player in polyvagal theory. It extends from the brainstem to various organs throughout the body, including the heart, lungs, and our digestive tract. The vagus nerve is like a communication superhighway. It helps regulate the body's response to stress and promotes relaxation and healing. When we look at polyvagal theory as a whole, it introduces the idea of a hierarchy within the autonomic nervous system, We have on one level our social engagement system. That's the parasympathetic activation we mentioned. It's our first line of defense where we are more relaxed, we're connected with others, we do things like digesting our food and maintaining our immune system. On the next level, we have the sympathetic activation system for responding to threats. It also is active during exercise when we might need to use our muscles more. The sympathetic system is when your Hulk mode is activated. If it's activated too much of the time, it can lead to things like chronic stress. I will point out, if like me, you find it absolutely absurd that the chill out mode is called parasympathetic activation and the panic fighty mode is called sympathetic activation. I really don't know why sympathetic is associated with the fight and flight response. All I can say is it's confusing, and I've heard plenty of psychology podcasts get it wrong, because it's just not natural to say the word sympathy along with anger, stress, fighty stuff. So to try and help you not make that mistake, just remember the Netflix and parasympathetic activation, or buy one of my mugs when I've made them, and I'll have you covered. Perhaps more importantly, there is a final and third response, and this is the immobilization or shutdown response. It is the last resort when we can't deal with fighting and we also can't chill out. So instead, we completely detach. Again, it has a wonderfully lame name, which is called the Dorsal Vagal State. I didn't name these terms. Please don't tell me off about this. But whether you are a student who feels like there's no point in trying because you're always told you're useless, or you've become burned out at work because there are too many overwhelming demands on you that you can't see a way out of, and so you just totally stop doing anything, well, these are both versions of our shutdown response, or the dorsal vagal state, if you will. And it can sometimes be quite dramatic, in fact. You may have seen memes of people who are scared of heights and they just simply pass out. And it is a bit bonkers to watch them, but it's kind of required because it stops them from having a heart attack when they're too scared. There is, of course, the less extreme version, which is just lying down and curling in a ball, which people genuinely do after an argument gets too intense for them or they don't know how to deal with the fight. And if you think of the caveman situation where we evolved from, well, when there's a threat, you commonly need to fight it or run away. But if there's nothing you can do about it because a predator is so big or you're too badly injured anyway, then lying down and hoping the predator doesn't notice you is maybe the best bet you have. And equally, if you're fighting a big battle and you're clearly on the losing side, probably the best thing you can do is just to play dead. So that is our dorsal vagal state. So now that we've learned some of the real basics, you can realize that people who are chronically stressed feel that they are continually in fight or flight mode. They struggle to relax properly, and that's why it leads to their health implications, panic disorders, or burnout. And it's also one of the reasons that people turn to drugs to numb themselves, because in the short term, it can serve to calm them down, place them into that chill parasympathetic activation state, at least initially, and that can feel very rewarding for them to be able to finally relax as opposed to being in their chronic stress levels. But in the long term, it detaches them and it shuts them down completely and puts them into the more dorsal vagal detached state. An indicator of this is things like the immune system doesn't function, digestion doesn't operate in the same way that it does when you're in the normal chill out state. And we all, of course, know that drugs aren't a long-term good decision, but you can see why in the short term it might give people temporary relief. So to quickly summarize what we've learned so far, we've been going through the triune autonomic nervous system and its three major branches. And it's easier to call this the three levels of autonomic nervous system, the three layers of protection, and I'll give you some sensible names for them. You have the connection mode where you are safe and social. That means you can connect with others, connect with yourself. It's your chilled zone, otherwise named parasympathetic activation. Then you have your defense mode or your fight or flight. This is your inner Hulk mode, which comes online when the body prepares to face challenges or threats. This is your sympathetic nervous system activating. Then finally, you have your survival mode. That's the freeze or collapse state where you give up and detach. This layer corresponds to the dorsal vagal complex where the body conserves energy by freezing or shutting down in extreme situations. It does feel a little bit binary, like you have these three different states. And if you ever thought it would be cool to just turn yourself on and off with a switch, it seems funny that we do have such distinct modes controlled by the vagus nerve, and our autonomic nervous system. Now, of course, these modes do actually exist on a spectrum, and you might be slightly angry or very angry, etc. So, of course, it's not quite so binary. But it is amazing how controlled we are by this vagus nerve. It doesn't just connect your brain to your body. It's also the key for us to understand why we sometimes feel on top of the world and why at other times we might feel like we've been run over by a truck. But there's some really good news here, is that if we can learn to be more in touch with what our vagus nerve is doing and how to work with it, then it is a little bit like discovering a remote control for our own personal wellness. And once you know how to use it, you can build more control into your life and into your outcomes. But before we get too far, firstly, there are some more things to learn about how the whole system works first, which I am excited to be digging into. So as we've learned, we have the vagus nerve, which is the chief communicator that controls how you switch between those three states: the connection safe mode, the defense fight or flight mode, or the survival freeze or detach mode. Well, the vagus nerve switches between these automatically without our brain being involved. But where does it get its information? How does it decide what to do? Well, it relies on a process called neuroception, but we could also call this our Spidey sense, though I actually kind of like the word neuroception. It sounds cool. Well, our Spidey sense is the tingly feeling that we get when something isn't quite right, even if you can't put your finger on what it is. If you've ever walked into a room and immediately felt like something was off, or maybe you met someone that gave you the creeps for no apparent reason, well, that is neuroception in action. Your body's built-in radar system, always on the lookout for danger, even when your conscious brain is just happily thinking about lunch. Your neuroception is always on, doing its thing without you knowing about it. Your conscious thoughts about danger that sometimes pop up are just the tip of the iceberg compared to all the other stuff going on in your subconscious. It's scanning every single sense you have in your body for patterns of potential threats. And this isn't just big, obvious dangers like a lion chasing you. It's also about those subtle, everyday things like the taste of a milk that isn't quite right, or the tone of someone's voice, or even the look in their eyes. These things that just make you feel safe or unsafe. And we often call this the gut feeling, which is actually sort of inaccurate because in reality, it's just something that is underneath our conscious awareness, but it's definitely our nervous system pulling all our different senses rather than just a feeling that exists in the gut. Anyway, besides my issues with terminology, there's another issue, which is that our neuroception isn't always right. In fact, our consciousness isn't always right, as we've discovered from our biases. So clearly, neuroception also gets things very wrong sometimes. Sometimes it can misfire, like a car alarm going off because a leaf has fallen on the roof. Your neuroception can trigger you to feel stressed out or anxious, even when there isn't anything to worry about. It's detected a pattern that could be a threat and it's sounding the alarm. I'm sure you probably panicked and run for a bus that wasn't even your bus, or thought somebody was saying something rude about you when they were actually being very nice. We just make these mistakes. So let's look at how our environment actually influences our neuroception. Because essentially, it is everything that's in our environment that is the thing that triggers us. Our senses are just designed to scan our environment, and that's why we have them to interpret data and understand the world around us. But environment doesn't just tell us what's there, it tells us how safe we are. And so, for instance, a calm, dimly lit room with soft music might trigger feelings of safety, relaxation. It might inspire you to write or play music. Whilst conversely, a loud, chaotic environment with very harsh lighting might activate your alarm systems. Even though there's no actual immediate danger present, it just makes you feel more stressed. Of course, less subtly than that, we might find things like our panic levels will rise just by walking down a dark street, or God forbid, someone tells us we need to give a speech. Another everyday example is perhaps you were texting someone back and forth and you ask them a question and they just don't text back for ages. And we think they no longer care about us, but maybe their phone ran out of battery, maybe they clicked on a link and went and saw something, just got distracted, how humans do these days, and then they were busy at work and then they didn't see a message because a bunch of other messages were there. And, it happens. But we can feel like they just don't like us anymore or something. And we'll find that the things that trigger us and where the mistakes in our neuroception happen is often related to our fears. And if we are very much scared of something, we're more likely to pick up on it even when it isn't happening. Now, fear in general is a huge element that holds us back in life. Of course, fear of failure or social judgments is the primary source of fixed mindset thinking. But the good news is that you can train your neuroception to become more accurate and reliable and less likely to panic over nothing. So I think at this point, we'll start by covering the basics of the vagus nerve and how we might go around controlling it before we go into more trickier examples of things like past trauma and attachment wounds and how we would ever work on those things. And then once we put all that together, we can apply the whole theory into the practical everyday scenarios like education, work, relationships, and personal growth. So we have all of that coming up after the break. Steve Jobs once famously said that design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. I've had my Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 for a while now, and I have to say, it is one of the best designed things I've owned. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it feels really good to hold. But most importantly, it works so well. I've never been so consistently well-shaved in my life because it's so enjoyable and easy to keep everything in trim. You can take it in the shower, it has a light to see what you're doing, the trimmer blades have skin-safe technology so you can feel confident putting it anywhere. So if you could take better care of your body and face hair situation, Manscaped are offering listeners of the show free international shipping and 20% off your order with promo code GROWTH at manscaped.com/growth. Even if you are a customer already, you can grab 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com/growth. Links are in the description. This episode is sponsored by Factor because I love my food. And I also love putting time and effort into cooking delicious food. But I don't always have time. And on the nights that we don't have time to cook, what has become a bit of a default for us is often eating pizza. And that isn't ideal. I have been seeking something healthy and equally delicious, and Factor meals are a game changer. With over 35 different meals that can be prepared to suit your needs, so calorie smart or extra protein, vegan, as you wish. They have everything, and their fresh, never frozen meals are ready to eat in 2 minutes and approved by dietitians. So however busy you are, you can still enjoy nutritious, really, really good tasting food. So if you're interested, head to factormeals.com/growthmindset50, or you can use the code growthmindset50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That is code growthmindset50 at factormeals.com/growthmindset50.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at bluehost.com.
So how do we control our autonomous nervous system when it is autonomous and primarily unconscious, which means it can't be controlled by direct conscious thought? Well, I'm glad you asked, because it's a very tricky thing. We're all aware that just because we want to be calm and confident for a speech, if for whatever reason our nervous system is feeling terrified, we as a whole are just going to be terrified. And for those of us who want to be more in control of our bodies, it's a bit unfortunate that the processes that the vagus nerves control are not related to our conscious brain at all. You simply can't consciously control your digestion or your heart rate. Things like sweating, pupil dilation, and blood flow to your muscles are not elements of your free will. But there is one thing the vagus nerve influences that your mind can also control directly if it wants to, and that is your breathing. The duality of conscious and unconscious control on the breath means that it can serve for us as a bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious autonomic nervous system. There's a real scientific reason why yoga and insight meditation place so much focus on the breath. If we breathe in specific relaxing ways, it can force our nervous system to also relax, slow down, enter the parasympathetic activation state. And I know that it's annoying when maybe you're panicking about something, people tell you to calm down, breathe slowly, and you're like, bro, let me panic. But sadly, you're wrong. Just breathing deeply in through the nose, out through the mouth, it's already a massive upgrade straight away to calming you down, making you think more rationally and less likely to cause yourself troubles. But we can go further than just the very basic in through nose, out through mouth. The best breathing method that we can utilize that even helps with panic attacks is the 4-4 box breathing method. And that means you take a long 4-second inhale, then you hold it in for a 4-second pause. You then take a long exhale over 4 seconds. And finally, you hold the breath out for 4 seconds before repeating the cycle again. And we can try it now for a fast example, if you like. So when I say go, you're going to start breathing in. If you're ready, 3, 2, 1, go. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 2, 3, 4. Now start exhaling, 2, 3, 4, and now hold again for 2, 3, and 4. And you're done with one cycle, and you should already be feeling less rushed, calmer. But if you were to do a few more cycles, it would really chill you out. It forces your body to stop rushing, calm all of its systems down, including even your thoughts. And it even helps for sleeping. I won't guarantee you perfectly sound sleep forever. But if you are tossing and turning, it can help to use this method as a way to slow your thoughts down. And if you find that's not enough for you, there is an even more extreme breathing method you can try for when you're having panic attacks. And that's to take one big deep breath in and put your head in a sink of cold water for as long as you can hold your breath. And it will forcibly calm you down as long as you don't choke, which would definitely be unhelpful for calming you down. But honestly, when you immerse your head in water, it just triggers your whole body to think a bit more rationally and calm down, because usually in that situation, it's not going to help you to lose your mind and you need to slow down your heart rate because you're holding your breath. So it does genuinely actually help calm you down. And breathing as a whole is such a huge and important tool that you can use at any time, and know that there is a way out of your scary or angry feelings that can help you take more positive actions. And it's something I would recommend to anyone. But of course, there are deeper things going on or more chronic things that we can't just fix by always breathing deeply every time, though it'll probably always give you some benefits. But it's worth looking into our life and seeing what other elements are causing us stress. In the same way that even with good breathing, if you're sitting in a loud and harshly lit room with lots of people, it's still going to be more stressful to do your work than a quiet and calm room with candles and soft music. Like, it's just a fact of life. Sure, you can be as stoic and peaceful as you possibly can, and you can train yourself so that the environment you're in has less and less effect on you, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's still having an effect on you. And if someone was hitting you in the face every other second, you're just not going to get any work done, for example, however deeply you breathe. So we should look at some longer term things in our life that might be causing us more chronic stress, besides people hitting us in the face every 2 seconds, because that's not an everyday example. Let's look at some things that are everyday. Perhaps waking up in the morning, you check your phone first thing, maybe. I'm not projecting, it's just possibly something you might do. Things like email, work notifications, even social media. Well, that's a bit like slapping yourself in the face first thing. They are not things that calm you down. They put your nervous system on alert from the moment that you wake up, if that's what you look at. And it's no wonder that our concentration is worse if we are wired from the moment we wake up by work demands or triggering news and strange stuff on social media. So sleeping in a room without your phone, and having healthier habits around our technology is a huge stress and productivity improvement that anyone can implement. And I won't cover all the details here other than saying that polyvagal theory gives us some neuroscience behind why it's so important to be in control of our habits with technology. And I'll definitely do longer episodes on how to deal with technology. And the last episode on the art of listening to yourself and getting more distance from technology was also a good one. But there are other sources of chronic stress that comes from lifestyle factors like our jobs, relationships, and health. And when we are in a more activated stress state, that does have some very long-term consequences. Stress has been shown to mess with your blood sugar regulation, which over a long time period can even lead to diabetes. Stress also messes with your heart rate variability and can lead to heart problems. Stress also messes with your digestion, which not only has a short-term impact of things like IBS, but also has longer-term impact in terms of reduced nutrient uptake and increased inflammation. So before I stress you out too much about the problems of long-term stress in your life, I think we've gathered that we do need to take stress seriously and that self-care isn't just about being lazy and ignoring responsibilities, but self-care done correctly is a very healthy thing that we do need to engage in. So if you find yourself feeling that your day-to-day life is just endlessly putting out fires, you will genuinely benefit from taking regular breaks because that can calm your nervous system down, which helps calm you down. And there's genuinely some legitimate reasons behind the saying, if you haven't got 10 minutes to meditate, you need 1 hour. And there's a whole body of data that's growing now about the fact that we do need time to relax and turn off. Get good sleep, spend time socializing, not working. All of these things are essential for a healthy human existence. So now let's look beyond our external environmental factors and start looking at our internal wiring and how that interacts with our stress levels. Some of us are truly wired to be more stressed due to our nature or due to past traumas or our attachment styles. In fact, researchers have found that individuals have a thing called vagal tone that relates to our capacity to deal with stress. Now, to remind you, the vagus nerve is the central core nerve that's connected to our 3 different nervous system branches that handle our different states of activation, the rest and relax, the defense mode, or the freeze mode. Well, the vagal tone is the general resting state of our vagus nerve and where it's most likely to be activating us. A low vagal tone is associated with things like higher heart rate variability and shorter breathing. In studies, it's been shown that people that have a lower vagal tone tend to recover much worse after an unsafe incident than people that have a higher vagal tone. And that means that after some form of triggering event, they will often get stuck in either the freeze response and be very low in activation, or they'll get stuck in hyperactivation and they'll be hypervigilant, they'll be in the fight-flight mode. And this can last for much longer than other people, and they might even flip-flop between these 2 states without ever getting back to the relaxed parasympathetic activation mode. But what's incredibly fascinating about this for me is that you can build yourself a higher vagal tone simply through exercising. Now, why does that happen? Well, exercise over time will physically strengthen your heart and smoothen out the variability of your heart rate and reduce the resting heart rate. And remember that your heart rate and your heart rate variability are physical signs of how stressed you are. And so you can physically change your heart to make your whole body feel that it's less stressed. And in the same way that you can train your heart, by getting fitter, you also train your lungs and increase your lung capacity. And that allows you to have slower, deeper breaths without consciously thinking about it. And again, that makes you feel less stressed. So for absolutely anyone, it just makes sense to get fitter. And especially someone that has more problems with managing their stress and has a lower vagal tone. It's crazy how these physical changes in your body will increase your vagal tone to be in a more relaxed state and increase your capacity to deal with stress, which for me, on the one hand, I just found this completely bananas when I heard it. And on the other hand, it just makes so much sense. I feel kind of dumb for not thinking about it before. Now, of course, there's the obvious benefits of exercise in the short term, like it gives you time to yourself to relax and think about things. You get the feel-good hormones from exercising. You can eat more without feelings of guilt. You might get to spend time in nature or time socializing with people. These are all such obvious and useful benefits. but I'd never thought about the fact that just lowering your heart rate and increasing your lung capacity would have the same calming effect as consciously slowing down your breathing, because it physically makes your body exist in like a general calmer default state, which is kind of nuts. And whilst we're talking about exercise, another benefit that perhaps isn't spoken about so much is the simple act of being stronger. Now, in the same way that when you're a small child, the world just looks really big, like a table will tower over you, a door, all the humans around you, they're massive. But the bigger that you grow, the smaller the rest of the world becomes relative to you. And it's the same with strength. When you get stronger physically, that means everything in the world becomes lighter relative to you. So opening doors, carrying your shopping or luggage, climbing the stairs, these things all become much easier the fitter and stronger you are. And the world just becomes a less difficult place to be in. And it just creates a reduced level of stress. And I find that for me, it does just create a reduced level of stress and a greater sense of autonomy moving around the world. And then there's, of course, the fact that you've been reliable at sticking to something, which is a nice win, and that you don't have to worry about your health because you're healthy. So lots of reasons to exercise besides some of the obvious ones. And I love it when you find really useful insights into why you should do something that isn't just your teacher telling you to go do it. Because the more positive reasons you can build for yourself to go and follow a healthy habit, the better, always for me. So glad to hear there's lots of neuroscience and psychology behind why you should really incorporate a regular level of exercise into your life. But we can still go further in terms of helping ourselves when it comes to safety. I mentioned that trauma and attachment styles can have a very big impact on our neuroception and our perception of safety, and that's because they do. And as I've already said, things like a better environment, better practices around breathing and regular exercise, it's amazing how much they can do for anyone, but it still won't sort everything out, especially when it comes to things like our past traumas. Our experiences can train our wiring to assume the worst in different situations and trigger us to feel really under threat. Trauma survivors can develop very heightened neuroceptive responses. That leads to things like chronic anxiety and hypersensitivity to potential threats. For example, a veteran who experienced a lot of loud explosions during combat might later find it very difficult to filter out background noise, and that can lead them to feel overwhelming anxiety in crowded places. If parents made a child feel like they weren't enough whenever the child tried to please them, the child might grow up to feel a crushing sense of imposter syndrome at work or even in relationships. If the child is used to loved ones letting them down, they might then panic and try to control people whenever they're apart from them, or be very hypervigilant in social situations. And you probably don't need me to tell you that those actions don't help achieve the goal of the safety the person is actually seeking. Generally, when we try to control people, they push back and the opposite thing to what we want happens. And so it's hard to emphasize just how important early attachment is between infants and their caregivers. For them, consistency and warmth is crucial for co-regulation before an infant can learn to regulate itself. And it's interesting how this works. In the same way that you can consciously regulate yourself through your own breathing, even though you can't consciously control the other functions in your body, you can't, of course, consciously control the functions going on in the baby, but you can regulate its sense of safety by being that safety. This lays its foundations for the child's ability to manage its own stress and form healthy relationships later in life when it grows up. And I'm not going to do a whole episode on attachment theory right now, but it's a very interesting topic, and it's really cool how much attachment theory and polyvagal theory interact with each other. And I'd advise checking out the recent episode with Jessica Baum on attachment theory, because that was great. And I also did a deep dive in February if you want to go a bit further back. Now, the good news about past trauma is that the negative impacts of it can be healed through a lot of hard work, and that shouldn't surprise anyone who knows anything about the growth mindset. Now, the things you might need to go into, it could involve journaling, meditating, practicing, of course, everything we've mentioned so far in this episode, also perhaps, and depending on different individuals, things like psilocybin therapy or CBT and psychotherapy. But let's look into the goals of what these things are trying to help us achieve. Ultimately, the big thing people want to achieve is learning to trust again, that whatever the experience can actually be a safe thing, or that people themselves can be safe. And individuals will need to work on whatever their weakness is with the help of others around them who can help them get there slowly over time. And they have to acknowledge that the problem is coming from their own side and not blame any easily identifiable external factors. Now, of course, it would sound silly if a military veteran blames Disneyland for having fireworks when Disneyland has had a fireworks show basically every night since it started. But in relationships, for example, it's much easier to blame the actions of the other party who maybe did something to trigger you. Perhaps they go out drinking with a friend and that triggers you because it's related to a trauma in your past. But ultimately, going out drinking with a friend sometimes is a completely normal thing for someone to do. And you can't really blame them for that. You need to look at your own internal triggers and find non-confrontational ways to talk about it with them, practice dealing with the triggers rather than seeking to control or hurt the people around you. And it's not easy at all, and that's why you might need to talk to a therapist and find ways that you can talk about these feelings without causing arguments. The book Nonviolent Communication is a really good one here as well, by the way. Now, on the topic of ways that we can increase our safety, a really cool one is pets. They can genuinely help us co-regulate. Whether you are someone who is lonely or you suffer from stress or anxiety due to past trauma, or you're just a human who's having a bad month, regardless, if you have a furry friend around, their consistent and non-judgmental presence can really help us stay calmer and regulate our nervous system. Now, you might be a cat person or a dog person, and both of them are really good, and also individual preferences are important here. But on the debate of cat versus dog, on average, science says that it's probably better for your mental health to have a dog, as on average, they can be more dependent on you and more likely to give you attention and affection than some cats. They also force you to exercise every day, and that means taking breaks from everything else you do, even when you don't feel like it. And it's often when you don't feel like it that you really do need to take those breaks. Now, of course, if you love cats and don't like dogs, you're fine. Cats are still great. And perhaps for some people, having more responsibilities might be triggering to them, in which case a cat is a much better option because they can be much more autonomous. The important thing is that having a pet is great for your mental health. Some other cool science here is the role of mirror neurons and how much we co-regulate with other people. Ultimately, humans are completely social creatures and we are just built to be around others. And there's so much that goes on beyond our conscious thought in terms of the ways that we communicate with each other. So if two people sleep next to each other and one is suffering from stress and one is not stressed, well, the stressed individual will experience a reduction in cortisol, whilst the non-stressed individual will experience an increase. So we actually slightly load balance our stress between each other. Another cool finding is found that if two people sit opposite each other like very closely in conversation, they don't just replicate each other's sitting styles, but in fact their heartbeats will often end up in sync. And I should probably just quickly bust a myth here whilst we're talking about ways that we fall into sync with each other. So people often say that when women cohabitate or work together, their menstrual cycle falls into sync. This has not actually been replicated by science, and maybe some people have fallen into sync by accident, but there's no evidence that it actually happens. And it's just one of those mystical sounding things that sound like it could be true, but it isn't. However, what is true is the fact that isolation on any human is very bad. Old individuals will decline in health much faster if they live alone, and there's a huge amount of evidence showing that married couples live longer than single adults. And in general, your mental and physical health has an essential requirement to spend time with other people. And something I think everyone should think about, whether they're trying to heal from trauma or they just want to be a healthy person. Something you should really do is spend regular amounts of time socializing with people who make you feel safe. Now, these people don't need to be the funniest people you know. They don't need to be the richest people you know. They don't need to have the best taste in music or wine or anything. They just need to be someone who, for whatever reason, makes you feel safe. They accept and support you during your ups and downs. Could be your mum, could be a friend, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. And another healthy thing you can do for yourself is be that person for others. So that means more hugs and less caring about what people do or don't do, and just appreciating them for who they are. Now, women, it can certainly be said, are often better at staying in touch and just hanging out with their friends for the sake of hanging out, whilst men often need reasons to hang out. And whether you think that's a good or a bad thing, it doesn't matter. Instead of fighting your nature, just find reasons to hang out with each other and make them happen. Whether it's playing golf, going to the gym, playing computer games, just come up with ideas to do things. I still talk with some of my friends from uni who made a book club, and it means that every few months we gather at someone's house to discuss a book, which maybe even one or two of us might have read, which doesn't usually happen, but the idea behind it at least exists and forces us to catch up with each other. And that's the important part. So, having learned all of this, let's apply a few lessons to education, work, relationships, and personal growth. And we will cover all of those in the final section after the break. You can do a lot in 15 minutes, but I think we all know it isn't always enough. And that's something that my sponsor, Shortform, also knows very well. Some books are just too full of useful information that you can't practically summarize them in just 15 minutes, if you truly want to learn much. Shortform focuses on knowledge density, and they take as long as it takes to give you the full education on the contents of the world's best non-fiction books. Listeners of the show, that's you, can get a free trial and 20% off an annual subscription at shortform.com/psychology. Link in the description, shortform.com/psychology for a free trial and 20% off an annual subscription. When I was an adventurous 10-year-old, I really wanted to sleep the entire summer in the garden, but quite sensibly, my mum vetoed the idea. Out of protest, I slept on the floor of my room instead. And I don't personally recommend it at all, but I do recommend my sponsor, Cozy Earth, whose sheets both my partner and I are a little bit obsessed with. I never thought that I'd care about sheets that much, and yet here I am, a grown adult who will excitedly show any visitor to my house just how amazing my sheets are, because God Almighty, they are another level of comfort I did not realize was possible. And compared to my summer of sleeping on the floor, this summer is shaping up to be the best sleep of my life, with their toxin-free sheets made using bamboo viscose that only gets softer with use. And yes, maybe I have learnt to appreciate some luxury in my life, and you can too at cozyearth.com with a 35% discount off of any order using my code GROWTH. That's cozyearth.com, discount code GROWTH.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're gonna love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
Now, kicking off how we can apply all these lessons into our life, let's start with education. If you've ever spent time around kids, you'll know that getting them to focus on anything other than their latest obsessions can be a challenge, whether that's dinosaurs, space, or of course, the mind-numbing nature of TikTok. And let's face it, the classroom can sometimes feel like more of a battlefield than a place for learning, especially for students that are stressed, anxious, or plain bored. Well, Polyvagal Theory gives us a new lens through which we can view education. It suggests that for students to really learn, they need to feel safe. Not just safe from physical harm, but safe in the deeper, more emotional sense. When students feel safe and connected, their nervous systems are in the ventral vagal state. They're open to new ideas, curious, ready to engage. But if you put them in a stressful situation, say an unexpected quiz, maybe a teacher is too enthusiastic with their red pen, well, that can make their nervous system shift into a fight or flight mode. Suddenly the classroom feels like a dangerous place, and their ability to learn and retain information can take a big nosedive. In the same way that no superhero has ever made the Hulk listen to anything whilst he's mid-rampage, it's very difficult to teach someone something when they are really stressed. Now, of course, we shouldn't go too far with this, or too woke, if you will. If you turn a classroom into a zero-threat environment completely where absolutely nothing could ever go wrong ever, that does mean that students won't really learn how to deal with the real world or to take on difficult tasks. But we can create a safe, supportive classroom environment, and it's crucial for learning and for a growth mindset. You have to feel safe failing, or you aren't actually going to try anyway, because you detach from the whole thing. And learning is all about failing, as you'll know if you listen to the episode on the neuroscience of growth mindset. So we have to make students learn to feel safe whilst they fail at things. And teachers are huge co-regulators of their students. And it's obvious that stressed and angry teachers will make us stressed as well. Whereas the happy and fun teachers who get excited about what they're teaching, they also make their students feel excited. And it's very similar outside of the classroom when we step into work. We've all been in situations like tight deadlines, endless meetings, and working with that coworker who just seems to know how to push all the wrong buttons. The workplace can be a minefield for your nervous system, and stress can lurk around any corner. But what if understanding polyvagal theory could make our work life not just bearable, but more enjoyable? If you take a typical workday, you walk into the office, log into Zoom, and immediately your brain will be scanning for threats. Did you meet your deadlines? Is your boss in a good mood? How many unread emails are waiting to ambush you? If your nervous system picks up on anything stressful, it can kick you into a more stressed out state, and your nervous system can go into overdrive, and you can get into a more stressed out mode, which you maybe don't even take out on your coworkers, but it ends up being carried home. What if instead you could stay cooler and calm, collected, and a bit more ready to take on the day? Well, that means creating work environments that make us feel safe and supported, and actively prevent our nervous system from flipping into overdrive every time people hear the dreaded pings of email. Firstly, a simple trick is just building in small moments of connection throughout our day. That could be a quick chat with a colleague, a few minutes spent stretching, or even a yoga class. Maybe taking just a few deep breaths before you go into the next task. These little small acts can activate the vagus nerve to keep you grounded, can prevent you from falling into a more stressed out state. It is amazing how these little things add up. I'm sure you know the effect of taking an early morning plane and you've had no sleep and then the whole thing's delayed the whole day, and just anything can start to make you stressed by the end of the day. And it's the same with work. If lots of things add up on top of you and you aren't dealing with them as you go through them, it becomes more overwhelming. And so not only can we implement our own strategies for our own work, if you are a manager or a CEO, understanding polyvagal theory can be a real game changer to help you foster an environment of trust and open communication that genuinely helps individuals stay calmer, collected, and that means that they'll be more productive, more creative, and more collaborative. If you're a CEO, you might not want to start every day with leading your entire workforce through a breathing practice. That might not be you, and that's fine. But it is proven that things like regular breaks and exercise increases people's safety and their work performance, so you can find ways at least to implement things like that, because it's only a good thing. We don't want to turn our workplaces into toddler daycare levels of just soft, everything is too easy. We do need deadlines, we do need accountability, but we do need to reduce the persistent levels of threat and distractions and increase the abilities for workers to connect with each other. And on the topic of connection, we have, of course, relationships. Relationships are the foundation of our social lives. They are the glue that holds our personal worlds together. Yet they can also be the source of some of our most intense stress. I'm sure you know the feeling when you are in the middle of a heated discussion or argument with your partner, and suddenly it just feels like the rational part of your brain goes on a coffee break and gets lost, and you're left with just your Hulk mode to handle things. And it's not ideal. The vagus nerve is not just responsible for flipping the switch between the literal mode of fighting and flight or rest and digest. It's also crucial in helping us build stronger, healthier relationships. And how? Well, by staying in the more relaxed state. That's where you're calm, you're connected, and you're able to engage with others in a meaningful way. It's our state for social engagement and connection with others, as well as connection with ourselves. So let's say that you are having a conversation that seems to be getting a bit out of hand. Maybe something is stressful. Perhaps it's a chat about money, maybe whose turn it is to do the dishes. If your nervous system does sense any kind of threat, a sharp tone of voice, a frown, maybe just the word budget? Well, your nervous system might start to ramp up the tension. Your heart rate will be increasing, your muscles tightening. Before you know it, your rational thinking brain has gone offline and you're convinced that this person is trying to ruin you and you're just ready to fight and smash things and no one has any logic left. What we actually need to do is control our temper and stay calm and collected. And I know that we wish our partner could hear this and do that as well instead of saying things that we can't help but react to, but we can only lead by example. If you can stay calm and collected, you will be better at listening, more empathetic, and less likely to say something that you will regret later. So the next time you feel a sense of anger or injustice starting inside you, take a deep breath and pause and consider how much it really matters. Remember that when somebody falls into their fight and flight mode, the parts of the brain involved in logic actually shut down. And so when you do engage in fighting with someone, you're never going to achieve anything than making both of you angry. And you won't solve anything or convince anyone of anything because no one is in a mode for listening or being convinced. If you can respond as an adult and be there for them and whatever their problem is, whether that's saying terrible things about you, that can really help increase their feelings of safety and turn down their activation. And if you can't stay calm, instead of reacting, you can ask for a break. And if they refuse to give you any space, you clearly have to tell them that you aren't abandoning them, but you're going to take some space for yourself to calm down before you respond. And you don't even need to tell them that they're being stupid and that they need to calm down because that's probably only going to make them angrier anyway. The important thing is firstly, making sure you keep yourself feeling safe and then providing safety for others. When both partners feel safe, their social engagement systems are activated. They are in that parasympathetic activated mode and their social engagement systems are online. That allows for open communication, empathy, connection, and that's what you need for a good conversation. However, if one partner perceives a threat, whether it's real or imagined, their body can shift into an aggressive state, and that will just make it difficult to engage or connect in any way. So, for example, let's say there's a couple where one partner has a history of trauma. In stressful situations, this partner might withdraw or become defensive. And it's not because they don't care, but it's because their nervous system is detecting a threat and just automatically shifts them into that protective state. And sadly, protective state doesn't just mean they look after themselves a bit better. That often means they get very overly defensive and sometimes attack. Now, it doesn't mean they should have free license to do this, but understanding this does help both partners approach such situations with at least some more empathy and patience and intention to create a space where safety and connection can be restored. And I'm really not saying it's easy because, believe me, it's not easy. It's really hard, but it is very important. And it's going to be absolutely crucial if one or both partners have any attachment injuries. So an overall take home here is that when your body is in a fight or flight mode, making decisions isn't usually a good thing, and you really need to return to a calmer state before you're able to think rationally. It's the equivalent of putting on your reading glasses, sipping a cup of tea before making any big decisions. You need to think about things with a wiser, measured, and definitely less destructive mode. If you're responding to a partner's problems with poor logic and anger, it's not going to be a productive conversation. So, as usual, safety is paramount. As I said, the book earlier, Nonviolent Communication, is really good for building ways of how you and your partner can both communicate in ways to be understood and heard without being offensive or aggressive. And now, finally, let's talk about personal growth. This podcast is about the science of self-improvement after all. Now, we all have goals, whether it's running a marathon, learning a new language, or just being a little bit kinder to ourselves. But these goals often aren't as easy as they sound. It can be challenging, uncomfortable, sometimes scary. And as soon as we mention the word fear, we are connected to Polyvagal Theory, which encompasses how we perceive fear. In any area that you're trying to grow, career, relationships, life, there are going to be moments when you feel like you're failing at something. And that's just a necessary part of growth. Maybe you're having a bad day. Whatever the reason, it's easy to slip into a more panicked state where everything feels a bit more overwhelming, or maybe you just have a strong desire to give up. But if you can keep yourself calm and collected, you'll find that personal growth doesn't have to be a struggle. It can be something that you approach with curiosity and even a bit of fun. Think of it like this. Instead of seeing challenges as threats, try to see them as opportunities for adventure, little quests that help you discover more about yourself. I'd like to think that any advice you receive from this podcast is kind of a call for adventure, to try something new, learn something about yourself, experiment with what's going on in your life. It's a continual act of discovering different ways that you can live your life and adventures that you can go on. So here's a fun exercise or call for adventure for you. The next time that you are faced with a challenge, imagine that you're playing a video game. You've got this tricky level to beat and it's frustrating, sure, but you know that with each attempt, you're going to be learning something new. You will be getting better, stronger, and eventually you will beat that level by consistently showing up and not letting the failure get you down. When you keep a more playful mindset to life, it can help you stay in a calmer, more connected state where growth feels less like a chore and more like an exciting journey. Now, of course, as we've covered so far in the episode, trying to remember all the different things we've learned about breathing, creating a more calming environment to work in, avoiding social media, notifications in the morning, although if you're serious about becoming a more relaxed and deeper thinker, I would probably just delete social media and email and notifications from your phone altogether. You can still have Instagram or whatever and just check it every few days on your laptop, but just don't have it on your phone where it just fills all your little moments. Anyway, we also learned about the importance of taking regular exercise because it will genuinely increase your vagal tone and resilience to stress, as will spending some time in nature. So double stacking and exercising in nature is just an absolute top life hack for anyone. I should also add things like eating a healthy diet and spending time with people who make us feel safe are essential to our well-being. And then finally, remember that everybody does need a little downtime, even superheroes. So you need to make time for things that bring you joy, whether that's reading, spending time with friends, or just taking a quiet walk. These moments of relaxation aren't just nice to haves, they are essential for keeping your nervous system balanced and ready for whatever challenges come your way. And for me, polyvagal theory isn't just about understanding the science behind your body's responses to stress. It's also essential for how you deal with setbacks and failure and how you learn to grow and build new talents. And our safety is just a core part of the growth mindset. When you can learn to tune into your nervous system, you can navigate life challenges with more ease, more connection, and maybe a little bit more fun. Whether that's staying calm through a tough conversation or just making it through a busy work day without letting it get you down. I really can't say how cool polyvagal theory is, and I really would recommend reading the book called Our Polyvagal World by Stephen Porges and his son Seth Porges. It covers everything you need to know if you found this episode surprisingly insightful or as important as I did. And I am delighted to also say that I am interviewing Stephen Porges himself on the show this week, and he is the guy that developed the whole of polyvagal theory. Now, at this point, you might be asking, why on earth did I just spend 1 hour explaining polyvagal theory when I'm about to have the most expert human on the world coming on the show to talk about it in 3 days? Well, that's a fine question, but I didn't want to waste his time just explaining the same thing he's explained a million times already. Instead, I went for having a much more insightful conversation on all the questions you might have once you've covered all the core lessons of polyvagal theory. There's, of course, plenty more things to go into, and so you'll just have to wait for the next episode and tune in for that. I do have to say, he is one of the most incredibly calming people I have ever met, which is not surprising considered he invented polyvagal theory. But I was still, surprised by it because he was so easy to talk to and just naturally culturing curiosity. It was a really great conversation and I'm sure you're going to love it. Anyway, now that we have covered the basics of polyvagal theory and how we perceive threats and safety in our environment, hopefully you can become more curious about your challenges in life, optimistic about overcoming them, and even find the process enjoyable. The world is truly an amazing place, and you are given everything you need to make the most of it in life. Sometimes it just takes a bit of practice and knowledge to help nudge you in the right direction. which is all I'm trying to do here on the show. If you felt like you did learn something here today, then I would, of course, love it if you could share it with a friend who you think is as curious as you are, and that would mean the world to me because it's how the show grows. And on that, please stay awesome, and of course, as is the topic of the episode, stay safe. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
But when we learn things, it's important to reflect. So I politely invite you to take a pause, rifle through the biggest ideas you just heard. So here's your opportunity to hit pause and have a think. Okay, did you wrestle with some insights? Information doesn't stick when we race from one podcast to the next without using our brain to play with the knowledge. So here's another go at a pause. Alrighty, I'll let you off to continue with your life now. If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
And other than that, please stay curious. Curious. Quote. Smiling for no reason.
Hello, I'm Vas Christodoulou, and I host the How To Academy podcast, a bi-weekly show exploring big ideas to transform our lives and the world. Our guests include Arthur Brooks on careers, Ruby Wax on mental health, Gabor Mate on trauma, Nicole LePera on healing your relationships, and many more. You'll also hear from iconic artists, politicians, and activists, including Naomi Klein, Gordon Brown, Anna Funder, and a whole host of other very impressive people. That's the How To Academy podcast, available bi-weekly wherever you listen.